Hi, everyone. This is Craig Zelzer from PCDN. Delighted to be with you here today for our current career impact chat with Adriana Dawson, who runs community engagement for Verizon. And she's going to be talking about building a career at the intersection of kind of profit and social impact. And this session is sponsored by the Rotary Peace Fellowship, which is one of the world's coolest fellowships for changemakers around the world. We will put the links in the chat and on the website where to find them. But basically, if you're a professional who's looking for a fully funded master's degree and or professional certificate or postgraduate diploma, the deadline for applications is May 15th. Adriana has had a 20 plus year career in all things social impact, workforce development, higher education, entrepreneurship, and many other sectors. So she has worked in hospital administration, university career services, small enterprise development, and is currently been working for Verizon and community engagement for the past few years. She's based in Rhode Island in the US, which I always forget. I think Rhode Island is the second smallest state after Delaware, but it's an incredibly beautiful state, or the smallest?
Smallest.
I always think there's a joke, and this is, I think, from Candid Camera many years ago for people who might know that show. I think it was for Delaware. They put a sign out on the highway one time, if you look up Candid Camera in Delaware, where it said Delaware's closed for the day, because they were just joking about how small it is. Catalina and I are in Medellin, Colombia. And Cata, if you want to just say who you are.
Hi, everyone. Well, clearly I am Catalina. I really am. Please believe me. But for those of you loyal listeners, welcome to the second episode of the Social Change Career podcast in this new format in which we first engage in video and then go to audio. But if you're doing audio, good for you. And today's guest is amazing. So I don't want to say anything more other than thank you, Adriana. And I just want to hear from you and hopefully keep the questions and the thumbs up and let's have fun.
And then just two logistical things. So Adriana will talk for a few minutes to give an overview about her career. Most people are watching on LinkedIn, so you can watch this live streamed or on YouTube. The video will be up later. This will be converted to our Social Change Career podcast on Friday. If you're watching on LinkedIn, put in the chat box a sentence or two about where you're watching from, so we can do that, and we'll try to show some comments in our platform. If not, we'll read them off. Kathleen and I will ask several questions after Adriana is done, and then we'll open it up. If people have any questions, put them in the chat box on LinkedIn, and we will try to read them off. So Adriana, thank you very much for making time out of your busy schedule, and hopefully it's not too cold in Rhode Island. And we look forward to hearing a little bit of an overview about your career of impact.
Absolutely. And thank you again, Craig and Catalina, for the invitation and for allowing me to join the conversation. And all the viewers out there, I look forward to your questions. So in spending a little bit of time with you and sharing with you my journey, building a career at the intersection of purpose and profit, I consider myself a multi-sector professional. As Craig mentioned, I started my career in state government, then went into healthcare, then I transitioned into higher ed, and there have been a number of different sector transitions, 6 in total, and now I find myself in the telecom industry. But the one thing that I've been anchored in throughout my 20 plus year career and having been a contributor across multiple sectors is being anchored in social impact, being anchored in community work, community engagement. So regardless of the industry I've been in, I have found a way to connect my employer partner more closely to the community. I have found a way to reimagine and rethink the original job description that I was stepping into to add more of a social impact component to tie the business, our narrative and the work more closely to communities that have systemically been overlooked. And thankfully, I have sort of found my jam and my sweet spot in doing that because I have helped cover the blind spots of some of my employers who historically had not worked very closely with flavorful communities, growing diverse populations. And so leveraging my cultural fluency, leveraging my knowledge of community, and my passion for lifting people and supporting causes that help transform lives and society has allowed me to, again, be at the intersection of purpose, right? Societal purpose, assisting humanity, but also by building those relationships and those connections and those partnerships very intentionally. Those relationships have translated into new business for the employer partners that I've worked for. And it wasn't until uh, maybe about 7 to 8 years ago when I took a long pause to assess my career path and the work that I had been doing. And I recognized the value that I was bringing to the business by way of my social impact work. I hadn't thought of my work and my portfolio that way before. I had been somewhat linear in my scope, but I found a way to activate that social impact work and that change maker work to help drive new business and capture new market opportunities for employers. And so I look forward to questions and further conversation about what that path might have looked like or strategies that I might have deployed along the way.
So I guess, Craig, you said I would start with the first question. Great to have you here and so many questions. Some of us, like myself, have had careers in the academic, NGO sectors and look at the private sector with both fascination, trepidation, and a little bit of a critical eye. And I have two questions. One, you said, I found a way to show my value to the private sector in order to translate your social impact skills into a giant like Verizon is. Could you elaborate a little bit on that, on the how, in case there are people, and we have folks that are burned out from the private sector
Mhm.
coming into this impact, but we also have people, and these, I love to talk about real things, people that are burned out in the social sector that want to get out to the private sector and continue to do good, but don't know how to speak private sector and let alone how to show that value. Tell us a little bit about that, Adriana.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you, the shift came for me when I started thinking about my body of work and my portfolio differently. When I recognized that my knowledge of community, excuse me, that my willingness to support society and how I approach that strategy was a competency. It was a skill, right? And you often don't see that listed on a job description. But quite frankly, uh, there's power in people and there's power in building relationships with communities and building a narrative that supports uh, uh, sort of critical topics and initiatives that are taking place. So when I learned or felt comfortable um, translating my value in a way that spoke to business, that's when things started to shift. So when I mentioned earlier, early in my career, I would be very focused on my existing portfolio. So if I was in healthcare at the time, in communications, or in other areas, it was about what I was producing within my department. But when I started becoming more strategic and recognizing how the work that I was doing and how I was engaging communities was impacting other areas of the business, and how I was able to track those outcomes, how I was able to identify the impact that it was having across the enterprise, across different departments. That's when I recognized I am adding value way beyond my department and way beyond this function that is uh, sharing my social impact competency with my colleagues who hadn't thought about their work that way. So that's when things really started to shift for me. And I would offer that as a recommendation to folks that are viewing today is um, honor your skills and your gifts and take a very intentional pause and assess your skills and the contributions that you're making across the business. And it's when you identify that and you're able to create that narrative and present yourself in a way that you don't just do this. It's more along the lines of here's where I sit within the business, here's my function, but here's what I do that is adding so much value across different areas of the business and connecting you with communities that perhaps you would never would have had access to.
So I'm going to jump in here. People are saying for some reason they cannot see the video. We've never had this challenge before. The audio is working and I have refreshed. So what I would ask is people to be patient and listen to the audio and put your comments in the chat box. We'll get to questions and then this video recording will be up on LinkedIn. We'll put it up later today and then it'll be on YouTube later. So apologies. I don't want to interrupt the broadcast, but we haven't had this problem before, but hopefully you can hear us. So we're getting a few people. So a question for me, and hopefully people who can hear, a number of people said they can hear the audio, is I had a conversation with a colleague today who works in the private sector. And one of the questions we got into is the private sector, can they put the interest of society, community, and sustainability above the pursuit of profit? And how do you see that in your role where you're working at that intersection of the company and community in terms of balancing community needs and the larger goals of Verizon as a business?
Absolutely. And that's a great question. And that really boils down to the triple bottom line, right? So that triple bottom line is people, planet, and profit. That's really what it boils down to. And for me, the employers that I have aligned with really have to connect with my North Star and my purpose. I've been very purposeful in stepping into spaces that are representative of my truths and the values that I am anchored in. And unfortunately, there have been instances where I've had to pop out of employer situations where I felt like it wasn't truly authentic or it was a little bit more performative. And so that's just the reality of what it is. But I recognize that my role or my roles have been sort of twofold, where again, being seen as a community change agent, as a change maker, and deploying out into these spaces, but then being able to bring back that information to the business so that the business has more of a keen understanding of what the community needs are so that it can be woven into the business strategy. So it is a balancing act, but for me, honestly, I need to align to an employer partner or initiatives that is purposeful and is anchored in lifting society. And I don't know if that completely answers your question, but it definitely is a balancing act. And the culture of the company or the business is important. The narrative, the support, the resources, and the funding, to make sure that those efforts get underway are also very critical.
And so I have one follow-up question, and some people can see the video again, apologies. So when it comes to the end of the year, for you and maybe other people working in social impact within Verizon, how do you report the success of your work? So is it in the amount of money or in-kind partnerships or people trained, or how do you report the results of your work? And for people looking to build a career at the intersection of private sector companies and social impact, what are the areas where you see companies can have the most impact?
Sure. And I would define that, and I'll offer an answer that's a little bit more broad as well and pulls on, my career experience, where at the end of the year, we would be looking at the strategic investments that were made, but more importantly, the people that it impacted, the number of folks that went through programs that were funded, the outcomes. And again, in a variety of sectors. It's been across different programs that touched different age groups. So it's measuring that, it's building and cultivating those meaningful relationships with partners. It's activating volunteer and volunteer hours in these spaces. So not just thinking about the financial contribution, but it's also thinking about the activation of talent to step into those communities, to add capacity, to add sort of knowledge, support. So, for me and for us, those have been some of the key tenets. Um, at the intersection that we've also been talking about, it's also been important to me to measure the contributions that I've made to other areas of the business. Have we been able to introduce new customers or new students, into the program or into the university that I worked for. And so it's measuring how social impact work, those relationships that are being built, how it's helping to build a pipeline, of new clients or new customers back into the business.
So you said something that I resonated with, Adriana, that was honor your skills. And if you can tell us specifically, what are some of those skills that you come into a meeting? Let's say in Verizon, there are engineers, people in sales, people in customer satisfaction, and you're like, this is what I have that no one else here in the table brings, and this is why I kick butt because I have. What is it?
Wow. Thanks for the question, Catalina. So I wouldn't say that my existing and former colleagues don't have it, but what I fully embrace is my flavor, el sazon. My cultural fluency, as I referenced before, the lens and the perspective that I bring into conversations. I think we all recognize that sort of society is changing. How people choose to spend their dollars or the brands that they choose to align with. Folks are making those decisions based on the social responsibility that they're seeing corporations lead with. And so they're very socially minded when those decisions are being made. And so uh, that's one of the offerings that I bring to the table from a business perspective is making sure that my colleagues and strategies are mindful of populations that businesses have historically not collaborated with. So I would say one of my competencies or one of my secret sauces, has been my ability to identify my cultural fluency as a competency where I'm helping cover blind spots to make sure that the business is stepping into spaces authentically, that it is honoring the historical and cultural context of communities it is stepping into, and where I am also helping to inform my colleagues of best practices and how to think differently about engaging in communities they haven't been in before. And whether that's from a language perspective, from translating and okay, let's not use stock pictures. There are real people in the community that you can include in these campaigns. All of the above. All of the above.
So if people have questions, feel free to put them in the chat box. I can tell there are about 40 people watching, so thank you for your patience. And again, you'll see the video later. So I'll ask a follow-up question. Again, we have about 10 minutes if others would like to contribute. So Adriana, 2 questions here. So one is, when people come to you and say, your career path is very inspiring, as a Latina, someone who's worked across industries, what is your career advice for younger professionals, particularly from diverse backgrounds, to build an impact career? And then the second question is, what are the most critical skills that you recommend younger professionals develop that will help them be more competitive, whether it's private sector, foundations, multi-stakeholder, like what are the skills that are more critical that you see are needed for the next few years to succeed?
Absolutely. And thank you for that question. So I would say that one of the areas that I believe has made me successful in this space is um, also the business acumen that I have, right? So having that social impact lens, my commitment to community, that community engagement perspective, but how that is also tethered to my business acumen so that I can step into spaces and make the business case. I can weave community and business together. So I would offer that as a recommendation is um, uh, don't be linear, right? If you have the opportunity to acquire skills that are more so in the business space, do it because you're going to need it when you step into the private sector world to ensure that the narrative and the business case you're making is led with those business strategies. I would also offer to emerging professionals, stay curious, right? Network and engage with folks outside of your sector. It's important for you to have a broader view of issues of the world, of what's going on, to help inform your strategy because things are moving and shifting very, very quickly. And when you have the ability to pop in and out of different conversations and be a contributor across different conversations, that's when you become really dangerous, right? But if you get very comfortable and very safe in that space you're in, which the community space is awesome, but um, you might develop blinders that won't allow you to connect to other conversations that can add further value to the portfolio you're creating, that will allow you to create new initiatives to reimagine how investments can be deployed, create joint ventures with other entities. So I would offer that, stay curious, network with folks across different sectors, and continue to pick up different skills outside of your existing line of work to continue to build that sort of comprehensive scope that's going to allow you to be even more successful in your role.
So, Adriana, if Craig is the good cop, I am the bad cop, proudly. So this question is a little mean because you just said that perpetually don't be linear, continue change. So my question to you is, and I don't even know if I'm allowed to ask this, but what's
Uh-oh.
next for Adriana?
What's next for Adriana? That's a great question. So I love where I'm at. My current role at Verizon allows me to activate all of the skills and competencies that I have acquired throughout my career portfolio. And so I feel like I am uniquely positioned within the business to focus on the social impact and community engagement work while I'm collaborating with different business units in different ways, whether it's supporting workforce development conversations, the sales team. And so I'm really enjoying that. And so what's next is I hope to do more of that. I hope to, extend my reach and continue to add value and contribute to new and exciting initiatives that continues to support our communities.
I love our conversation, and I notice I jump in with Craig. Remember, I'm the bad cop. I mean, the way you express yourself very eloquently, but you speak very good business. Like you speak about your portfolio and investment deployments. You use a lot of private sector words. So what sort of skills or what things do we in the social sector have to, or not have to, but it's recommended to polish or acquire in order to be competent and employable or marketable if we wanted to do some impact work in the business world or in the private sector?
You know what? So here's the truth, an additional truth. We need to tell our story better, right? Some of us in the social impact space and in the community space are so focused on the work, on doing good, on supporting people, on supporting initiatives that we are so focused on the work, sometimes we don't stop to tell the story, right? So I think we need to do a better job of acknowledging our contributions and what we are doing. And we need to signal to uh, employer partners or anyone else that you want to signal, here I am. This is my value added proposition. These are my distinguishers. But I think, and especially for those of us, and being a Latina, for a long time I subscribed to some cultural norms that were sort of dictated by my cultural history, which is be seen and not heard. Men are, you sort of take a back seat to the male. So there are a lot of things within my own career early on that I subscribed to, that when I decided to shed that and tell my story and build my personal brand, things started to shift for me. I started to think about my portfolio differently, my professional narrative differently. And when I stepped into conversations with colleagues or different employer partners, I was able to tell the story in a way that didn't just speak to here's what I've done, but more here's what I can do for you. And not only will it be a benefit for your company, but it's also going to benefit society.
So I think we have 5 more minutes, and thank you everyone for your patience. I can see you have people from Nigeria to Colombia to the US all over watching. And so a question here is, when you think about your portfolio at Verizon or the team, can you provide maybe what is an example of the project or partnership or investment you're most proud of that you think demonstrates both your skills and the commitment of Verizon to engage better with community?
Ooh, that's a
Or if it's not just one, they can talk, I don't want to put you on pressure to pick your favorite one, but something that inspires you, like the story you go back to the most when you're talking to people at Verizon, why this is important.
absolutely. So one of our priority pillars under our Citizen Verizon commitment to humanity and society is around digital equity and digital inclusion. That's one of three. And I am extremely proud to have partnered up with colleagues and community partners to support seniors with their digital literacy skills. We often have seniors now more than ever, they are purchasing mobile devices, but they don't know how to use them. And they don't know how to completely leverage that technology to stay connected, whether it's connected to news, connected to family, or health wise, where they're needing to check an app. And so we've been deploying into the community as volunteers to support seniors at senior centers to learn how to activate their device to mitigate isolation and loneliness. And we've been doing it in multiple languages. So that's one way. Another way, another sector we've been working with is the justice impacted community, folks who have formerly been incarcerated, who are stepping back into society, who need support with career and job readiness, and supporting them in facilitating workshops and training programs on how to think about themselves differently, how to pivot the skills that perhaps they leveraged in a previous life and use those skills for good to support their career opportunities. So again, there's a number of different ways that we engage, where we're stepping into the community. Our talent assets are giving of their skills. They're supporting hard to reach communities. And that's a real deep commitment for myself and for my colleagues at Verizon.
Kathy, you have the next question.
Oh, it's 101. So no, Craig, I really well, Adriana, it's been a pleasure. I think you talk in terms of advice. I already asked beyond what I wanted to ask, which is what's next with you. I want to say that your last answer gave me a much excite me a lot in terms of the digital equity. I was actually thinking that I had a conversation with my best friend where he was saying how isolated his father, who's in over like mid 80s, because everything that comes now is, packaged here. And if you're not part of this, you're isolated from society, like completely. The world is very small and very cruel to those that are out. So I was just not formulating a question, but just thinking what a cool mission it is to bring, as you say, people out of isolation and democratize digital skills, to folks that need it. And what better way to do it in a culturally diverse place like the United States, with seniors from different cultures whose English might not be their first language. So we have a last minute question, and I want to stop here to give it to Daniel Esiet, for you. What certification would recommend for somebody starting out in community engagement?
That's a great question, Daniel, and hello. So there are a number of certificates around community development, whether it's a 3-month certificate, 6-month certificate. So I would suggest that perhaps you Google that. There are a number of institutions across the country who have virtual or online certifications, and that will offer a great foundation or framework to understand the systems of community development and the intersectionality of this sector, from housing to food insecurity to low to moderate income populations to education, because community development and community engagement is the intersection of all of that, all of the things that impact society.
I want to add to Daniel, if I may, Craig, couple ways through to learn about community engagement that comes to one. One I know for sure, the other one I'm guessing. The one I know for sure is degrees in conflict resolution, where you can focus on community work and you can learn to become an expert facilitator in local communities. I think that I know for a fact, because I've been trained in conflict analysis and resolution and social work as well. I would venture are good avenues that you can explore certification to get experience in community development. But remember, experience is the key.
So thank you so much, Adriana. I will ask one final quick question, but I'll just wrap up with a few things. Apologies again for the video challenge. We haven't had this before, and we'll try to make sure it doesn't happen next time, but thank you for everyone for sticking in. Our next Career Impact Chat podcast will be with the co-founder of Carbon Collective on April 12th. You can find it on my LinkedIn profile. And Carbon Collective, we think, is the coolest sustainability robo-advisor in the world. So if you are thinking about how to either connect your personal, or if you work for a startup and want your employees to have a sustainable, affordable, and they're not paying us to do this, we actually do like them, explore kind of robo-advising and sustainability investing in publicly traded companies. And Zach Stein, the co-founder, has gone from composting. He had a composting startup, and then pivoted from composting to sustainable investing with his best friend, who he's been friends with since 5 years old. So, and again, thank you to the Rotary Peace Fellowship for supporting this. So anybody who's looking to develop skills, they do support this, but Catalina and I have taught in the program and do a lot with it. It's a great program open to people from all over the world. And my last 2 quick questions, and they'll be very quick, is what are you learning right now or hope to learn in the near future? And then just the last thing is also just for hiring, when you help hire or you see hiring at Verizon, obviously for these kind of positions, if it's community impact, you're probably getting lots of applications. So any advice for people who are trying to be competitive, what helps candidates stand out?
Absolutely. So to answer your first question, I'll defer back to a comment I made earlier. I'm being very intentional about stepping into other sectors and learning about those trends and those strategies to identify how I might be able to apply some of that in my work, right? My goal is multi-sector, intersectional, and so that will be a key continued learning process for me. And as far as employability and folks looking to step into this space, the social impact space is exploding, folks. It is absolutely exploding. If you're having a hard time connecting with employment, I would advise volunteerism. As you have the ability to demonstrate how you're continuing to impact community, what it is that you're doing, what it is that you're supporting and leading, that would be a great sort of resume contribution that an employer would certainly feel very comfortable with. So I would offer that.
Thank you so much for your time. So we'll end it here, and thank you everyone for watching live now or in the future, and please come back for the next one.